All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of It's Personal. I am overjoyed. It's early here, but I am super excited to talk to my guest today. He is such an incredible human for the work that he's done for the literary world, for people in general. And I'm super excited just to chop it up today about life, joy, happiness, etc. Can you introduce yourself?
That is such a nice introduction. My name is Michael Arceneaux. I really appreciate you making time, especially early. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. And I want to let you know that I see you, I appreciate you, and you, based on what I've seen online in some of the conversations I've been listening to, I know that things haven't always been easy for you. But I want to know, how are things going right now in regards to just life in general? And is there anything I can do right now to help you? Through this conversation.
Honestly, you even asking is really kind. It's my first Mother's Day was this is my first Mother's Day without my mom. My mom died about 6 months ago. We lost her to cancer, so grief is a daily challenge. Life has its foot on my neck and my
Mm,
his neck. So, I'm trying to be grateful for people like you and to remind myself of why I write and to keep writing. Because last year was pretty rock bottom for me all around. But, I'm doing my best, which I don't know what that means on a given day sometimes, but, I'm doing the best with everything. Yeah.
and that's the most we can do sometimes, right? But I hear you, I see you, and I haven't talked to you, but I'm sending all my love and condolences to you and your family because I haven't have I still am lucky to have my mom in my life, but I know individuals who don't, and I can only imagine, some of the thoughts, the processing that's happening with you. Something about, Black females, and you speak about this very often in a lot of the work that you do. Um, can you share a little bit about, and when you talk about her, think specifically about one of your stories about when she's knocking on the door. And I want to say it's Houston, I think maybe.
Yes. Thank you again. Yeah, I'm thinking you're talking about. There's an essay in my new book. I finally bought some Jordans where, after I left New York, after like 7 years, I was there during the plague when Harlem was like the epicenter of the virus at one point. So it was a lot of sirens, a lot of death, a lot of sickness. And generally speaking, I had already felt like my time in New York had come to pass. So I left and went back to Houston for a while. I didn't realize I did it until after the fact, but I was kind of foreshadowing. I think in the last couple of
Mm,
years, I've lost a lot of people. So I realized how time was so precious and that I wanted to be closer to my mom. So I ended up being there about, I can't remember the exact number of months, maybe like 6 to 8, something like that. But in any event, I was out in the Airbnb that I had rented out for a while, and Texas had a snowstorm, but because of the governor and some other stuff, Texas has its own grid, and the grid failed. So I was freezing. I did not have any battery, but there was no water. It was pretty bad for like 3 to 4 days. There was one point I was like, I can't feel all my toes, and I really was in limited contact with my mom. And my mom, she didn't care how old I was. She's like, no, I'm gonna go get my baby. So at one point, I begin the chapter saying, basically I was about to defecate in the bag because no plumbing, and I hear a
mhm.
bang on the door, and it's my mom, all 5'4" of her, I think, 6. I'm messing up her height, but she's short. Banging on the door with a big flashlight, talking like, "Come on, I'm coming to come get you. We got power at the house." Because I hadn't had contact with her in like it probably had been more than 24 hours, and yeah, my mom didn't play that.
Mhm.
And I'm 30, I don't know, late 30. She's like, "Okay, come on, get ready, let's go, let's go, let's go." And so I got up and went with her. And but just I'm glad I shared that because that's just kind of a testament to my mom. She didn't care how old her children were. Her babies are her
Mhm.
babies.
Mhm.
If she can physically come get me out of a situation, she would.
Mhm.
I mentioned in the book when I went back to Texas, first thing she handed me was holy water and a taser, which I think is the best way to describe my mom. And I don't know, in Houston. So yeah, my mom was honestly, she was my lifeline, my favorite person in the world. But yeah, she would come get her babies no matter what.
I love that, and I think it's a testament to just black mothering in general. Like
Yeah,
no hesitation. Like doesn't matter the weather, doesn't matter the circumstance. Like she was, and let alone you're the baby. Like right,
yeah.
I
Not her baby. Yeah,
yeah.
the street still didn't have like the street lights still weren't working. It was really bad. Like Houston
Wow,
was down bad. She did not care, but yes,
wow,
testament to her.
wow. And I mean, you do. When I listen to your writing, I think one of the things I love about it is like just the depth that you can go into with specific topics. But then, which I think anyone who's listened to your writing or read your writing is like the humor that is involved. Where does that come from? Is that something that you've been brought up around, or is it something that has like grown over time?
I never, I mean, I would like to think I'm funny now, but I didn't necessarily think I was particularly funny as a kid. But I will say, like, in hindsight, everyone in my family, in my immediate family, and the extended family, I do know some of them, like my mom's sisters, whatever, cousins. They're everybody's funny. Everybody has in my immediate family like a very particular type of humor.
Hmm.
We kind of can share jokes, but for the most part, we all have strong personalities. And I think sometimes people can use humor to overcompensate, and that they don't necessarily want to share their feelings. But for me, also at the same time, it's like if I didn't know how to laugh at how difficult life could be, I probably wouldn't still be alive. So, kind of a combination of everybody in my family being funny on their own, but also kind of just needing humor to kind of get by. I think
Hmm.
that's not necessarily unique to my family, but yeah, I would say it was encouraged. Like I always had like a strong point of view, and for the most part, even if my mom didn't agree with me, she didn't discourage whatever I had to say. So yeah.
Hmm. No, I love that because for me, someone who um, is early on in their like writing journey, like I feel like I've been writing for a while, but getting into publishing, I'm very early. But listening to someone like you and looking at like the progression that you've had in your books is amazing because I do feel like specifically with like I Can't Date Jesus and then moving to um, what's it called? I Don't Want to Die Poor, and then now finally to and let alone like I love them. I'm bouncing around a little bit, but I love the cover of I finally bought Jordans as well. But just the depth within all those books in itself and the way that you've been able to transition I think you've also grown as a writer looking at those things as well because the way that you're able to you know lean in on some of the heavy topics that the world is going through and that are also important to you and then also put it on a page where it's accessible for you know everybody specifically um, those who identify as queer, those who identify as black, like that realm, and then outside of that as well, which I love, and not a lot of authors I think can do that. I really
I
don't think so.
appreciate that a lot. Thank
So,
you.
so no, I appreciate you. I appreciate you. One of the things you speak specifically about that I'm so interested in is like just the intersections between like race, queerness, and pop culture. And you know a lot about pop culture, obviously, but how do you see like these identities and like the cultural kind of like forces shaping the experiences of like the LGBTQ plus community and like the people of today? Like, how do you see those things like interacting with each other?
One of my friends who's also an author, one of my favorites, Janet Mock. I think when she was promoting her first book, Redefining Realness, she talked about how for a lot of people who grow up without a lot of means, which is more so how we related, because when I read her book on a plane, I found her story fascinating, but then I was like, well, girl, our dads sound like the same person sometimes.
Hmm.
But she mentioned how for a lot of people, pop culture is their access point to a world that they otherwise wouldn't know. A lot of that is related to just class, but particularly when it comes to like queer people who grow up in probably environments and communities where, at least of a certain age, well, actually any age in America, but you're not necessarily exposed to as many people around you, or if it's kind of like met with shame and silence, and particularly how I grew up, I feel like I'm that last part of that last generation where people were really kind of forced into a closet.
Hmm.
I mean, we might be pushed back in given the next election, but I digress. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, it was just that access point. So for me, even in before I sold out Candid Jesus, because it took a lot of convincing for people to believe that there was a market for my voice and what I had to say. I
Hmm.
wrote about how like Janet Jackson taught me about sex. When she did the Janet album, I was only 9 years old, but I used to like one of her dancers, Omar Lopez, which I mentioned in the first book. I had my button untied, but I used to always like consume a lot of information. Like I have an older sister, she's 9 years older, so I would read her magazines. I would go buy magazines myself when my mom would take me. She did an interview with Rolling Stone where she talked about being like a late bloomer and how
Hmm.
sexuality for her was a means of her embracing her sexuality more and being more open about it helped her in her own like development. I'm paraphrasing, but that's not unlike a lot of queer people. That's not like unlike a lot of people. So
Hmm.
for me, I gravitated to people like that. Mary J. Blige, the way she opened up about her emotions and kind of like, cycles of abuse, addiction that she had been around. These were a lot of things that, theoretically were too young for someone my age, but because I was exposed to so much in the chaos
Hmm.
of my childhood, they were like, again, my access points. They helped me articulate feelings that I couldn't yet. They helped me feel less alone. Even as I got older, when it comes to Beyonce, I love her obviously because she's from Houston and the greatest, and I'm like the first stand. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I think she doesn't often get a lot of credit for the subcultures that she included. Like if you're black and you kind of grew up on that like East Texas, Houston, got like borderline, Louisiana, like the bounce music, the sissy culture, what they call sissy bounce back then.
Hmm.
A lot of people didn't know what that was, but you got drag queens and like, I say colloquially the punks in the background dancing, that helped me feel comfortable with the stereotype about like effeminate men and kind of like letting that
Hmm.
go and like not being
Hmm.
defined by that. So I don't know. For me, a lot of the pop culture stuff, not to could repeat, but it just for me, yeah, I read books and there's academic theory and all of that, but a lot of times people just want something that they can watch and buy and hold on
Hmm.
to that isn't so above. And I think
Hmm.
pop culture, while, in some cases we maybe rely on it too much, but at the same time, that's all we have, because I wasn't
Hmm.
able to learn this in schools. It wasn't talked about in church for sure. It wasn't talked about around people. So these are all the women who really helped me figure myself out.
Hmm.
So I think it was only right that I incorporate that in my work. One, because it's just true, and also, I kind of for a long time really talked in pop culture. I just couldn't help it.
Hmm.
It's just a lot of my consumer. I mean, I also am like into politics, but a lot of people don't care, and I get it. So even then, it's just easier to bring up Mary J. Blige and Beyonce than like policy. People don't care that much.
Yeah, and I think that's so. Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think you said it. You said so many things there, but one of the things that stood out for me was like, it's an access point, right? It's such a easy access point for people who don't want to go too far above, because academia in itself can be it can be very challenging for people, including myself, who is a teacher. And it's like, there's lots of theories about things that you just don't want to read. They're not fun to read, and the access point to that is not it's not accessible, right? So I totally agree with you, and I think pop culture does all of those things for so many different people. Michael, what are you listening to right now? Are you listening to anything outside of the individuals that you just talked to? Is there new age kind of individuals within hip hop that you're enjoying? Because I know that there's an interesting thing online right now about like new age versus like old school, and how the new age is very different than what it used to be. But
Oh yeah, I'm not one of those. Not to cut you off. Like
no, it's okay.
I live in LA, and I think generally speaking, a lot of people are into kind of. I mean, honestly, like old music gets more spins than new because people are very nostalgic, and
Hmm.
that's cute, and I get that. But no, like I like to listen to new things. When I go outside, I don't want to hear the songs from 20 years ago. I definitely don't want to swag surf. You can bury that song for all eternity. So like, like I like my things, but no, because I pulled up my phone to see what have I been listening to. Well, obviously I love Sexy Red. I'm not one of
Mhm.
those. Get It Sexy. Actually, I was having one of my grief cries in the morning. Turned
Mhm.
that on, started singing, and literally stopped to pray for her success so she can keep going because she
Mhm.
brings me joy. I love the Anicia's. I guess
Mhm.
that's a mixtape. I mean, I guess you
Mhm.
call the album. It's like 30 minutes. I guess I gotta accept that that's what it is now. But
Mhm.
what is it called? Princess Pop That. I love that album. I really love that album. I love my Meg with all my heart, original hottie. But I kind of want
Mhm.
her to go back to the hood. I'm like, listen to that.
Uh-huh.
Obviously every Kendrick diss that came out because Drake has gotten on my nerves for years. So the more the merrier. Um, Yeah, it was, actually I've been listening to a lot of Anicia.
Uh-huh.
Anicia, oh Lotto. I love Lotto. I'm a scratch off.
Yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
don't think enough people like Sunday Service. The girls have been dissing going diss strikes before the men, but sexism.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and oh wait, that song Espresso, I actually do like that. I didn't know people were arguing about it, but it's cute to me. It makes me want to
Yeah.
like flip on my air ponytail, so I'm fine with it. But
You
yes.
got a lot. You got a. I think that's a well. You got a lot of range, which I always when I look at a playlist, I always look to see if someone has range. If they have the same stuff, it's like, oh, I get it. Like I'm definitely like an album person. Like someone has an album, I'll listen all the way through. I'll listen all the way through again, and then I'll pick out like the songs that I like. I won't probably go back and listen to the whole thing again, but I could tell, like, yeah, you're definitely like a for the culture person because it's not typical for someone that I don't think it's typical for someone to have so much range on a list. Because oftentimes when I ask people, they have two or three artists, and it's like the whole list all the way through, or it goes all the way back to the 90s or whatever it is, and it's like so much of the nostalgia which you can get tired of over time as well. um, I have another question, and my wife told me to ask you this. She said, tell me about your skincare routine.
Oh, I just broke out, but hello to your wife. Well, my friend Corey is much better at this. So I think it's CeraVe. I don't know how you say that. That, the moisturizer, I do use that and the retinol. Um, Actually, I use a lot of their products. The face wash. I will say like what helped my skin because I actually have to fight the sun in LA. I mean, it's like dreary now. I don't know what the hell this is, but I have to fight the sunlight a lot. It kind of breaks. That's been breaking me out. That's the only one of the rent, but the drawback of LA outside of liking it. But yeah, I drink a lot of water. I
Uh-huh.
moisturize. I use a retinol. I got to work on these. I can't have these bags. I gotta get rid of that. But eye cream. But that and laser hair removal that helped a lot actually.
And it's so interesting because I mean, I growing up, I'm from Canada, but I grew up in an all black community, largest black community, indigenous community, black community in Canada. And we, skincare in itself, and I think just like specifically for men, was not something that I ever talked about with anybody. My mom was a advocate for, trying to make sure that I had good, clear skin. And I struggled as a kid, and I was self conscious. I
Same.
went through so many phases. I like most recently told my wife, like, yeah, I remember in high school, I was like, I played sports, but I was trying to put like cover up on. I was trying to like do all the stuff just to like, not be looked at a certain way. Um, but there are products out there that can help Black people, specifically men, take care of their skin, be proud of their skin. But I feel like it's not talked about enough. And I think right now there are people online that are doing it. But if you're not actively searching for those people and they're not in your algorithm, they're not going to pop up for you. But there are people out there that are doing it. So I had to ask that because she was like, "Oh, you should just check and see. Like, what is he? His skin is so glowy." I was
Oh
like,
no! Thank you to the wife. I appreciate that. We trying to hold on, getting older.
"Yeah." No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I guess the other question for me was, I had it written down here. You talk a lot about mental health, and I remember you mentioning before we came on that is something that hasn't been easy for you recently. In an interview I listened to back when you first released this book, you talked about how, or no, sorry, this is way back when I think you did an interview with Breakfast Club. I think this was a while back. You talked about not seeing a therapist. Um, is there moments in your life where you feel like it is essential to have people like that to talk to, or even just like friends to talk to? Or do you feel like you sometimes need to sit with, those feelings alone? Like, how do you process through some of the mental health stuff that you've been going through?
A kind of a combination of all. I mean, my thing is, I think I don't really like this attitude that a lot of people, particularly, I think I can't remember exactly, but the sentiment that Black people do not value their mental health. I
Hmm.
don't actually find that to be true. I think you hear a lot about Black people talking about their mental health, particularly in their art.
Hmm.
I think it's just not dealt with in the sense that people say you should go to therapy, but I don't think the reason why a lot of Black people don't go to therapy has to do with stigmatizing. I think that's the case for some people, but for a lot of times, it's like, where does that stigma come from? And in America, it comes from Ronald Reagan, who was the
Hmm.
president when I was born, when he was in California. Although he was a buckethead actor, he stigmatized and removed a lot of mental health care services in the state as governor, which is why you saw and continue to see a lot of people who are homeless on the streets who are dealing with mental disabilities. He closed a lot of that stuff. He deprioritized mental health. So this is over like the year, over the course of 4 decades, because he repeated this as president, like closing all these mental health centers, like shunning it away. So I think that's a lot of the attitude, like a broader sense that just generally speaking, white people have more money and have more access
Hmm.
to mental health. I don't
Hmm.
think if you went by the numbers and broke it down, particularly by class, there's not that great of a difference. That said, I'm happy more Black people are going to therapy, but I also think, when you go to therapy, there are not that many Black therapists. And I think while, you go to school and do all this stuff, there's a lot of cultural differences, racism. Because I mentioned in my first book, I believe, I tried to go to therapy when I was 19. I went to my mom and asked for help. I went to a therapist who basically and articulated, what was I feeling. I had these he basically just said, you have ups and downs, but you're fine, and then shoot me away. He didn't know what to deal with, like some Black 19-year-old
Hmm.
articulating his pain. I only found out like a year ago that my mom still had to pay for that BS session. So I was like, you should have got your money back.
Hmm.
So even now, there are people I know that could benefit from therapy, but they just don't have the means. And so there are more, accessible measures now to an extent. But I think in the same way, it's hard for Black people, regardless of their financial status, at times to get adequate health care in this country. And
Hmm.
I deal with like bigots and all types of crap. I don't know if I can cuss or not. I haven't said crap in like 30 years, but you know, it's the same is true for mental health care. All that
Hmm.
as said, I know that when it comes to me dealing with grief, it is time for me to find some sense of grief counseling, be it with a group, one on one, some combination of the two. Um, Grief is something again that is a daily challenge. I don't know who I am anymore, and I still have a sense of core, but you're a different person when you lose a parent, or in
Hmm.
most cases, and I'm definitely dealing with that right now. So I'm not against therapy, but I just think sometimes when people talk about, Black folks don't care about therapy, black man, blah
Hmm.
blah blah. I'm like, are you gonna pay for it? If not, be
Yeah.
quiet. I'm
Yeah.
doing the best I can with what I have.
Hmm.
But I do know now that I need grief counseling because I think this is something that I cannot handle. I mean, I've been handling it on my own with
Hmm.
friends and people understand, but there is like something to be said about professional care, particularly about something like grief that's going to be like a lifelong battle.
Hmm. No, I appreciate the vulnerability, and I think it's so true. Like, yeah, are you going to pay for it? Because that
Yeah.
it is not cheap. It is not cheap, and there is a difference from professional help and talking to a friend, and
Yes.
sometimes friends, partners, whoever, like they can, unfortunately. and not even unfortunately, they have limits as well. Like that's not their specialty, right? And oftentimes they need coaching as well. So like it's just it can be very complicated and limited within like your bubble or your sphere of like friendships and family. And sometimes you do need to reach out, and sometimes that isn't accessible for everybody as well. So um, I see you, man. I really do appreciate the vulnerability and just like the sharing, because I know that it is not easy to talk about grief and trauma and all those things. And you, again, you do all those things really well within your books. But what are some things that you do for joy? And that could be outside of listening to music, reading, etc. What are some things that you try to do for joy?
I like my pop walks and hikes. That's
Hmm.
very LA transplant of me to say, but it can be helpful. I hadn't really been out a lot, but I will say while it is surreal to have to promote a book only a few months after burying your
Hmm.
mom, it forced me to be outside. It forced me to go back to cities I used to live in but hadn't visited in years.
Hmm.
So I say all to say it reminded me like at one point I told one of my friends, "Oh, I think I miss me in New York," and he was just like, "No, you just miss the streets." So sometimes just
Hmm.
going out and hitting the streets, like I went out Cinco de Mayo. I went to brunch with two of my homeboys, but then I went to a day party that one of my friends mentioned. And while it was wild running into so many different people from every walk of life, from elementary to the first time I lived
Hmm.
in LA, I really just wanted to go with a margarita in my hand and yell Ovi ho. And doing that really was great for me. I could still get low. My knees still work. Praises to Houston. So even just going out and being social, that was really healthy for me. Um, yeah, I think just kind of being around people. I think
Hmm.
I'm comfortable with my own company, so finding things that I can do on my own outside of my apartment is good and has been helpful. But I think because I'm not with my immediate family, so only I'm really here understanding the magnitude of my loss, being
Hmm.
around people that I can be a little bit of my old self has been good
Hmm.
too. Like,
Hmm.
y'all know the streets. The streets have brought me joy.
Hmm. That's a,
The
I
sick,
mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, I hope you get more of that. You deserve
yeah.
more of that. I really do. Have you had time or space to write? Is that something that um, at this moment, this time allows you freedom or liberation or whatever the words are? Or is it harder when you're grappling with like so much that's going on in life?
I'm a working writer, so I've been writing, like doing assignments, some freelance stuff, since it's been going on. I think I did fall back in some instances. Some of that is just, I don't know, media collapsing, but it's also just been trying to juggle a lot, including the book release and just trying to get people to give me the space to talk about the book and promote it.
Hmm.
I've been able to do certain things like commentary, some interviews, some podcasts, pilot stuff, like things like that. That's not really writing, but just kind of working. Excuse me, but I will say I normally would have already probably had another book proposal completed, and I do
Hmm.
have an idea about what to do, but writing about my mom is a challenge. I've come to, I mean, not, I kind of knew it, but I have something, I don't know when it's going to run, but it'll be in like the New York Times magazine that I wrote about my mom and grief and trying to find connection. And that was really difficult to write. It was
Hmm.
impossible not to do it without breaking down. So that's been a thing. And it was a challenge, but I think I got it. And then some of the writing I've been working on. I've been working on it for years, but I'm in a different position now on the TV adaptation of my first book, and
Hmm.
that even itself has been. I appreciate it. It's they're hazing me. It's like year six, but we close. Yeah,
Hmm.
that has actually even been a challenge too because it's not like I don't know what I want to do, but sometimes I get in my own head with this type of writing, a more creative part, which to the point could be kind of, you want perfection so much it's like destabilizing,
Mm-hmm.
debilitating, excuse me, and you don't get anything done. So I just sent something off to my producer. I was like, "Yo, this might suck. Please help."
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, it's not as bad as I think. But I think I have been writing. I feel like I'm jumping around, but yeah,
Okay.
I've been doing some work. But I think the work that I'm most passionate about has been a challenge. And I must say, like, to be honest, last year I kind of really came to resent writing. I felt like
Mm-hmm.
it kept me away from my mom. I think that's something I'll work out with in therapy soon enough. But I'm trying to also regain my love of writing and why I
Mm-hmm.
decided to do this in spite of all the signs that writing is being devalued. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not perfect, but and I think I'll get back in my groove soon enough. But yeah, I have been writing. It's just challenging depending on what exactly I'm writing.
I appreciate that. Well, I appreciate that you're writing. I appreciate everything that you put out. I see you. I do. I hear you. I'm sending all of the space, the time, the love your way, because I know you need it, and I want to make sure that other people know that, like, you're not someone who's just doing the work to do the work. Like, you're someone who's you're grappling with something, but then you're also still sharing all these things with the world, which I think is says so much about who you are as a person. So I appreciate that so much, and I enjoyed my time. Where can people find you online?
Thank you. Yeah, it no longer applies. I am young the regular way. Young Sinick, so young cynic. If you did that was like a if you I had an old blog called the Cynical One, so at one point that was like my rap name. I really should have been a rapper. I'm really mad I'm not, but to people out there, don't give up on your rap dreams. Don't be like me. So yeah, that's where that name comes from. But I'm young cynic on Twitter, although that's a miserable place. What is it? Thread? Not no one uses Threads, but shout out to Threads. And Instagram. I have a
Uh-huh.
TikTok, but nobody. I don't post on it. So
You don't post on it. And I
no,
guess
that's a
what
different name.
my last question: have you bought any Jordans lately?
I got gifted some Jordans from my friends at my book stop in Houston. It
Okay.
was my first time going home since my mom passed. My dad even went, which was interesting and a treat because he behaved and it was all nice. My brother was a part of it. My aunties and their wigs made a grand appearance, and then at the end, my friends bought me some Jordans, so that was really nice. And I still need to buy the Jordans I told myself in the book that I would give.
Uh-huh.
Them 11s, but I'm gonna get
Uh-huh.
them. But yes, I got gifted some in March.
Okay. Okay. I'm a Jordan person too. I'm also getting more into like Nike Dunks a little bit, but yeah, like 11s and probably 4s are my 11 and 4. Those are the only ones that like fit well, and like one fit well,
Yeah,
but everything else is they're big. They just fit big.
yes, which is honestly, I normally I'm like an Air Max person. Like I love an Air Max.
Uh-huh.
That's very of my gen, I guess. But yes, those two Jordans you mentioned, it is about the fit because it's like big clunky shoes, and I got like long skinny feet. Well, they're shrinking now. Apparently, that's the thing that happens when you get older. But yeah, the
I
fit
get it.
matters.
I totally get it. I totally get it. I'm gonna stop it here.